Yo, what's up, guys? So I was browsing on the internet and I saw on Reddit a very interesting post actually. Returning to Blender after a decade. Holy cow, that's how it's called. So yeah, I thought I could make a good video out of this and just talk to you like what changed throughout the whole Blender. I mean, it was started in like 2000, in like 1995, I think, something like that. And yeah, I mean, like what, like over 20 years of development, almost 30 years of development. So yeah, actually, let's see. Let's hop into this post. Okay, yeah, so there it is, returning to Blender after a decade. Holy cow. Okay, okay. So saying I'm impressed would be an understatement. Blender feels so shiny and new and very, very overwhelming. I mean, I could argue with that. I mean, Blender, I would say the whole interface has changed to a better user experience side a lot. I mean, back in the day, Blender was kind of difficult to learn. It wasn't really new user friendly, and I mean now it's way easier to use it. But yeah, I mean, I get it. He's basically saying that it's overwhelming. It's pretty much because it has way more features. I tinkered in 3D back in high school, but I've barely touched creativity since. Now I'm getting back into it, and I'm wondering what changes and additions pop out the most to you, fine folks here in Reddit. Yeah, we'll get into that shortly. I mean, for me personally, I really like Cycles, Eevee render engines, Cycles X, its new uh, caustics. I mean, a few years ago, I even had to learn LuxCore and look into Corona. And yeah, I even downloaded and everything LuxCore into Blender. I mean, yeah, because it supported caustics. And basically, if you don't know what caustics are, they're basically if you have some kind of a glass and light shines through it, basically it just points something like a point lamp and it shines through the glass, you see those kind of reflections on the table. So those are the caustics. That's how they work. I'm going to work my way through the manual. I mean, come on, manual. We all know that the best manual is YouTube and some newer tutorials. Yep. Anyone remember the gingerbread man tutorials from 1.4-ish? No, I don't remember those. I'm not sure if I was. I mean, I've been working with Blender for like around 7 years, so I'm not sure. Probably not, because I guess it's like 10 years ago. So yeah, I wasn't doing Blender back then. So I'm familiar with some of the more basic new stuff. Endgons and cycles were very new when I last really used Blender, but I grabbed those. Okay, but nodes for everything. What's the state of the game engine? The Grease Pencil is a whole new thing now. Yeah, I mean, Grease Pencil is just mostly for people who like to draw stuff, do 2D animations and stuff. I mean, I never used Grease Pencil. I'm not planning on using it. But yeah, it's just something that Blender offers, I guess, because Blender offers everything. It doesn't specialize in one specific thing. It basically offers everything. For example, some other software such as Maya or ZBrush. So Maya specializes exactly in character creation, and you can create characters basically really good in that in Maya. It's just basically the best in the industry for characters. And then ZBrush is best for sculpting, and Blender is just a little bit of everything. That's how I would say it. So yeah, I mean, though we could argue that Blender is really good at hard surface modeling. I had a talk with Ubisoft creative director like few months ago, and he was going to work for Sony actually, and he was responsible for creating the whole pipeline for it. And he actually said that he will probably implement Blender with all the add-ons. It's just so powerful for hard surface modeling. It's just way faster. So yeah, I mean, Blender is getting, it's a real deal now. What stands to you the most from the last 10 years of Blender development? For me, I mean, we'll go through everything. I actually made a whole sheet basically telling all the versions and key features of each version. I mean, for me, the Eevee render engine, if we're talking about everything, then Eevee for sure, because if you have lower NPC, it's just way faster. You can actually work in Eevee and then switch to cycles, tweak some settings in there, some materials, and you'll just be good to go. And just working inside of the cycles all the time, it's quite slow. Actually, it's gotten faster in the recent years because, I mean, yeah, we'll go through the whole list. They updated a lot of stuff. They improved the cycles a lot. Okay, let's see what people are saying. Let's source from the best. Okay, so it's a quite recent post. It got some views. The game engine is no longer in Blender itself, but there are sub-projects like UpBGE, Orange Engine. Yep. And then, let's see. So they're just talking here about that. Okay. What was the purpose of Blender a decade ago? I heard it was meant to be a game engine, just curious. From my knowledge, it was 3D software from the very beginning. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be a game engine. Yeah, this guy saying when I was first learning, the big claim to fame, the big claim to fame was when the bullet physics library was used in the film called 2014. Okay, yeah. So when I started in 2017, it was 2.7, and just a year, breakthrough happened with the real-time engine, Eevee. Yep, that's what I was talking about. The Unreal Engine funded $1 million. And again, 2 years after, the geometry node was the GPT. Yep. This guy remembers, has nostalgia for the Gingerbread Man tutorial. Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff for sure, and it improved a lot. So, okay, so let's just go through my list and let's see actually. So, yeah, so let's just quickly go through it and I'll just basically explain a little bit more what this means if you're newer to Blender and stuff. And it's just spending a few minutes to get to know the whole history of Blender. I think it's cool. Blender 1.0, it was released in 1995, so yeah, I was right, January 2nd. And yeah, so it just had basically modeling and rendering capabilities. I guess that's it about this version. Blender 2.0, wow, it took them 5 years to come up with second version. That's interesting. A complete rewrite of the software, the more modern interface. Well, that makes sense. Then introduction to NURBS modeling. So NURBS is basically the whole 3D splits into two things. NURBS and then geometry, polygon, modeling, faces. Basically all the structures, they are made out of faces. And NURBS, they're basically curves. And they have basically... You can put it this way. So like NURBS modeling is like Illustrator. It doesn't have pixels. And then mesh programs such as Blender, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, all those ones, they use pixels. So you basically can't scale too much, or you'll just get pixels. And so NURBS softwares are just like Fusion 360, Rhino 6, 7, those types of CAD softwares. And then animation and rigging tools. I mean, animation is when you just make something move. Rigging is basically preparing to animate the model in an easier way. Also, you need to basically rig people or just soft surface stuff more because it needs to bend stuff that needs to bend. Okay, and then Blender 2.3. So yeah, Blender 2.3. Add the game engines for real-time 3D interactive content. I mean, maybe they were trying to make it into a game engine. I don't know. And Blender 2.3 took them 2 years to make. Subdivision surfaces was smoother mesh modeling. Yep, so basically, there is subdivision surface modifier. That's one of the workflows, how you can model stuff. It's definitely really useful in some cases. I personally don't use it too much because I just don't really have a need for it. But yeah, I mean, I do use it where I need to use it. Introduction to Yafray. I'm not even sure what that is actually. Integration for advanced rendering. Yeah, I mean, it was years ago basically. Blender 2.4. 2005 major interface improvements. Yeah, so Blender throughout all the years they introduced a lot of interface improvements, and I mean it makes sense. Character animation tools like armature system. Basically, if you don't know what that is, it's basically not simple rigging, it's basically the whole rig structure where you just create, basically look at it this way, you're creating bones for a flesh, and those bones basically are rigging. And then you have weight painting, which is basically paint which areas of the skin bones will affect. So if you have something like bending arm, you would just put two bones, and then you would paint weights in the middle, and then when you bend one bone, the whole skin should just follow it, and it should create a nice bend. And then particles and hair dynamics. So particles is basically something, I mean, it's useful in Blender, but it's something that I hate using because it's still lag and just hard to work with. I don't know, just weird. And basically particles, you can just create something like stars or something falling out of sky. And then hair dynamics, I mean, it has a lot of uses. I won't go into it, but just quickly, basically you can use hair for actual hair and then comb the hair, and then you can also use it for something like placing rocks or grass on the landscape. I mean, a lot of uses. It's just basically a whole nother video just about them. Then Blender 2.5, a complete redesign of user interface and workflow, again redesigned. And then Cycles, rendering engine for physical-based rendering. Now that's interesting. So 2011, again, 6 years from the last update. And yeah, Cycles, that's when they first introduced Cycles. And Cycles is a render engine, and Blender still uses Cycles right now. It's really good render engine, I would say. You can compare it to Corona, V-Ray. Those are just different render engines. Improved 3D sculpting tools. Okay, so they never mentioned when sculpting was even introduced. It just basically improved 3D sculpting tools. So I guess it was sculpting was created somewhere in that time. Customizable workspace and more add-ons. Okay, yeah. Then Blender 2.6, 2012, dynamic topology sculpting. Yeah, so that's okay. So they started working more on sculpting. If you don't know what dynamic topology sculpting is, there is basically a tick in Blender at the top right side of the 3D sculpting viewport, and basically what that does is it creates as much geometry as you need if you're sculpting something. So let's say I take like a cube, then subdivide it a lot so it has denser geometry, and then I sculpt something. I will have basically I will be able to basically sculpt as much as geometry allows me to sculpt. And then with dynamic topology sculpting, you just basically increase the amount of faces, and while I'm actually sculpting, at the same time it is creating geometry. Okay, B-mesh modeling with Ngon support. So Ngons, they aren't a thing in Blender, to be honest, right now. It's just mesh modeling program. You cannot really use any Blender for Ngon modeling at all. It's just a mesh program. It uses faces. But so they probably just ditched this idea. We'll see in the other versions. And now we're actually slowly coming to groundbreaking versions, actually, which was 2.7 almost, and then 2.8. That was a real game changer. Dynamic topology. Okay, so better motion tracking and stuff. That's for VFX. and then Blender 2.7 in 2014. Wow, so I was already using 2.7, modeling with it. So yeah, I started using Blender somewhere around this time. And yep, so introduction of the Filmy color management. So basically, if you don't know, by default, Blender used to use different color management thing, but it was raw color, I think, and now it uses filming. Basically, what it does, to put it simply, just basically everything looks better. All the colors, they just look better, to put it simply. Real-time rendering with the Blender game engine, and then the freestyle NPR, non-photorealistic render engine. Yeah, so those ones, I'm not really sure about those ones. And then Blender 2.8 2019. This was a groundbreaking one, Eevee. So Eevee was introduced, which was a game changer. We already talked about that at the beginning. A real-time rendering engine for interactive 3D graphics as well. And then Grease Pencil, 2D animation tools. Grease Pencil, yep, 2D animation tools, that's exactly what it is. Redesigned user interface with a more modern and user-friendly layout. So yeah, exactly. I think this was the best thing that Blender could have done in this case. Made it more user-friendly, because it had a lot. It started to have a lot of good features, but it was still kind of difficult for new people to learn it. Everything just looked way too overwhelming. And yeah, I mean, they just made it more user-friendly. And actually, I even got a different file to just go ahead and go through some of the key features of Blender 2.8. Let me just see. Okay, there it is. Yeah, so Blender was completely redesigned actually. Actually, let me just get it and show it to you guys as well. Just really quickly. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, so basically Eevee render engine. Yep, it's just basically a real-time game render engine, then Grease Pencil, and then key industry standard key maps. So that basically just made basically all the shortcuts were just made into industry standard shortcuts and stuff, and so it's just easier to learn the software this way. And then Blender's Open Movies, the release of Blender 2.8, and it was basically released with a short film called Spring, which was created using Blender. This demonstrated the software capabilities and the improvements brought by the 2.8 release. Okay, what the hell? Let me just move this out of the way. Okay. Yep, and then actually it received a lot of funding as well. The development of Blender was made possible through the Blender Development Fund, which received significant contributions from the community and the industry. Yep, so I mean, funds for sure, and then Blender growing popularity. Yep, so probably there's a good chance that if you're a little bit older Blender user, you started learning Blender in 2.8, because a lot of videos were created. It was just a lot more user friendly, easier to learn, so a lot more YouTube videos, content and stuff was released as well. Yeah, and then customizable workspaces as well. Okay, I didn't even know that customizable workspaces were released then. Beta and alpha released. Okay, yeah, so basically I would say this was basically a breaking point for the Blender, when it was still good software, but not really industry standard, but now it is actually a lot of indie developer companies use use Blender, and it's actually interesting. Even if you're looking for a job, so I noticed that there is a tendency in Europe, in Canada, to hire people who know Blender even more than people who use 3ds Max or Maya. In US, it's a little bit different. I see a lot of job postings, and they actually require you to use 3ds Max or Maya. I think I don't know why that is. My guess is that they are using they have already implemented other software inside of their pipeline, and they developed different add-ons for it. They just got used to it, and now switching would mean basically they would have to just completely change their pipeline, find new plugins to install it, and I mean, it's just way too much hassle. So that's why they prefer this. Okay, then Blender 2.9 improved cycles rendering performance, better sculpting and UV editing tools, integration of new Intel Embree ray tracing library. And now let's get into the fun stuff. So these are the most recent versions, starting from 3.0. So it was released in 2021, December 3. Cycles X was introduced, and I mean, goddamn, it is for sure way faster. It's way faster. And then geometry nodes were introduced as well. If you don't know what they are, it's basically you manipulate geometry through nodes. So if you want to create something like a tree, you can just go ahead and use math and just use those nodes and just create tree branches and stuff. I personally don't use it because it's math, you know. We're designers. I mean, I just hate math, to be honest with you. I mean, I need to use it somewhere, and a little bit, but yeah, we just hate math, so we just stay away from it. And yeah, I mean, I use geometry nodes only for one thing. When I was rendering wireframe, I find that it's really helpful to just use geometry nodes and then to render geometry nodes and then to render all the wireframe. It's kind of it's easy to set up, and you can just render wireframe. You get a lot of flexibility with it. And then asset browser as well. So yes, you can easily, so let's say you created some kind of a model, and then you can just save it. There is a specific way how you need to save it, and then you can just easily drag and drop all your saved files in your scene. So that's really useful. And then Grease Pencil was basically enhanced as well. Blender 3.1 mainly focused on just geometry nodes and asset browser improvements. And yeah, not that much. And then 3.2, it was released in 2022, June 8th. This release had more features and improvements to the geometry nodes. Again, geometry nodes viewport compositor, if you know, so, and then Grease Pencil again, and then they also worked on animation and rigging tools as well. Most notable features were simulation zones for geometry nodes, and then new line art modifier for Grease Pencil, and then pose library, thumbnails for animations. Then let's go to 3.3. It was released in September 7th, 2022. This release added more features and improvements to the Cycles render engine, the geometry nodes, the Grease Pencil again. So basically, in recent years, they were just making Cycles better, improving the Grease Pencil, adding few more tweaks here and there regarding interface and then sculpting. And then Blender 3.4, released in December 7th, 2022. This release added more features and improvements to the Eevee render engine. So they kind of just went back to Eevee. They just kind of developed Cycles a little bit more. Then they go back to Eevee. And then they actually improved UV tools as well. So, okay, yeah. So I was about to learn completely different software for UV unwrapping, but UV Packmaster 3 saved me. If you don't know what that is, it's basically an add-on for Blender, which makes UV unwrapping way easier and straightforward, and you can do and you can just UV unwrap faster and better. So I personally still to this day prefer UV Packmaster than Blender's UV tools, but they are much better now. This is like a significant update to UV unwrapping. UV's, yeah, before it just really sucked, and now, I mean, it's usable now at least. Definitely usable, but still UV Packmaster is better, and I do use that. Uh, yeah, what else? 3.5, March 29th, 2023. Okay. This release added more features and improvements to the viewport compositor, geometry nodes, and grease pencil, and the physics simulations. Okay, so they are still working on the same stuff, but they are starting to improve physics simulations. Like I mentioned, it was terrible, and now finally they're making it better. So we'll see, maybe in the upcoming years it will become even better. Some of the notable features were the new viewport compositor editor mode, the new attribute transfer node, the geometry nodes, the new pose brush for grease pencil sculpting, the new Manta-fold fire simulation. Yep, so fire simulation. And Blender 3.6, June 27, 2023. This release added more features and improvements to the Cycles render engine, the geometry nodes, and the grease pencil and the animation rigging tools. Yep, so some of the notable features were the new hardware ray tracing support for Cycles for Windows 10 devices with DirectX 12 Ultimate drivers. Yeah. Okay, so then Blender 4.0, it's expected to be released on November 7th, 2023. So that's that. I mean, yeah, definitely a long way. It's come a long way. Currently, I still don't like how physics simulations behave. I mean, it's usable, but if you're making some project and you have a deadline, you should never use physics simulations. You should work your way around it, or you should learn Houdini and use that. Houdini is basically the best software for VFX, and just I know that there are good ways how you can create stuff, create simulations in Houdini and then import them in Blender. So that's a possibility as well. Though usually stuff such as hair particles, more complex node structures for materials, what else? So those, they don't really transfer well with exchange file formats such as FBX, OBJ, JLB. Those ones, they won't be able to transfer that information from let's say one software to another. So it's really nice that Houdini has actually implementations how you can transfer simulations from Houdini into Blender. I mean, yeah, we've come a long way for sure. So yeah, I mean, I guess that wraps it up. So if you need, this file will actually be in the description down below. It will be uploaded in Google Drive. So if you want, you can just go ahead, download this file, just go through it yourself. And yeah, as always, like, subscribe if you want to watch more of my stuff. I'll just basically be uploading stuff related to 3D and mostly. So I specialize in hard surface and stylized assets. So if that's something that you're interested in, subscribe, like the video for the engine, so more people can know the whole history of the Blender. And see you next time. Bye, guys.